So welcome back to part two, and we're going to continue with Goffman. Now the self then is the face that we create. And I know in Psych of Adjustment we talk about the self as a creation. It's something that we work on a day-to-day basis, especially according to sociologists like Goffman. We have a strong emotional attachment to this face we've created. We've invested a lot of time and energy over the years to become who we are. That is, at least present an image of who we are. All right? Now, if I'm in face, and this is a strange term, but being in face leads to confidence and reassurance. So if my face is well supported by my behaviors and it's in the appropriate context, I'm doing well, right? And I'm confident and self-assured in that regard. Being out of face or presenting the wrong face, or for heaven's sake losing face, leads to emotional pain, and that can be experienced as shame, anxiety, and guilt. You know, I've come on too strong in this meeting. I can see from the response I'm getting that I've messed up, and now I feel guilty for saying the wrong thing, or I feel anxious. Am I going to be able to extricate myself from this negative situation that I've created by presenting the wrong face or the wrong aspect of my multitude of faces, right? So saving face is often through the restoration of the expressive order. That is, it represents identification with the emotional states of others. So if I meant to give someone a compliment, right, and I do this in a certain way, but it turns out to be really, you know, reacted to as an offense, now is the restorative work is in order. And notice it's the reaction of others that guides me through this process. Margaret Mead called this the looking glass self, right? And who do we understand that we are? How do we come to understand the self? How do we practice and modify the self? On the basis of the reactions of the people with whom we interact. And that's a pretty fascinating idea when you think about it. Now, a given face is on loan and can be taken back if alignment isn't continued. So we might actually offer to someone, say, I bet that's not what you meant, right? And what I'm doing now is offering you the loan of a face. Are you going to accept it and extract yourself from this situation? Or, like I said before, are you just going to double down and send this interaction down the toilet, so to speak, just swirling down the bowl, right? And I'm sure we've all had that experience, or we just didn't get it and things continue to go south. So the self is not an organic thing that has a specific location. So the self, according to Goffman and many sociologists, isn't located in here. It's located out here. This is where the self. There's a fundamental fate to be born, to mature, to die. Its dramatic effect arising diffusely from the scene that is presented. So it's me within the context that becomes all important in this regard. Remember Lewin? Yeah. The field in which we're operating becomes all important. Right? Yeah, that's right, Annika. So Goffman's avoidance and corrective process then. So, avoidance involves discussing certain avoiding discussing certain topics, right, in order to maintain a positive face. And you know, some people want to keep it light. I tend to like conversations that kind of go deep, kind of involved, and maybe kind of controversial. And quite often, people are not, other people I'm with are not wanting to do that, and they shut it down pretty quickly. I say, oh my God, do we have to be so heavy? Do we always have to? And I mean, if I persist, they might say, why do you always have to be such a downer and look at all these things? Can't you just ever go out and keep it light and have a good time? All right, and what people are doing is offering you a corrective opportunity. They're saying, man, the face you're presenting is not consistent with where the rest of us want to be. Do you want to modify the face, adopt a new face somehow, or do you want to be just kind of eschewed, I mean, and no longer welcome to come around? I mean, that's the most extreme example, right? Topics that lead to argument can result in anger, frustration, and anxiety. And that can be problematic because maybe you're at a dinner party where everyone keeps it light, you know, and you maybe had one glass of wine too many, and you start saying, you know, well, about and it makes people uncomfortable because it's not what they're there for. We're missing the message, we're missing the script, we're missing the context at that point in time, right? So, what can we do? Well, the corrective process that Goffman outlines for us can be employed instead of avoidance or when avoidance didn't work. So let's face it, we got the wrong face out there. What are we going to do? We've kind of made a mess of it. We stepped in the pile of steam and poo. People are not down with the stink. Are we going to just keep it up, or are we going to modify to make everyone feel better about it? So this four-part corrective process begins with the challenge, and people call attention to the infraction committed. They say, whoa, 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 that's not where we want to go at this dinner party, or can we find another topic of discussion, because this is just going to lead us down a path that makes everyone uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, shoot. And this is the offering now. Having been challenged, right, I'm offered the opportunity to apologize and explain the infraction. And this is done to reestablish the expressive order, that is to bring everything back in line, right, to make the circular flow circular once again. And it may just be in the form of just joking or not taking direct responsibility, such as maybe I had to drink. And I said, you know, I really didn't mean that. I was just joking. So people have brought the infraction to my attention, and now I am going to disavow my own face that led to the discomfort, right? And you know, often one of the pat excuses, especially at dinner parties, is that, you know what, maybe I had a little too much to drink. Certainly not something I meant, and I think rather than finish this glass of wine, maybe I should get myself a cup of coffee or a diet soda or something, right? And I'm at this point offering an apology and promising not to commit the infraction that may follow, right? So I'm moving out of it. Now, 4 parts, remember, so we're only halfway through it. The restoration, then, the offended accepts the apology or the act of reconciliation. They say, you know, I knew you didn't mean that. I mean, I knew you couldn't have meant that. So it's good to get that out in the open, right? And this is the ritual offering of acceptance. And notice this follows the lines of a ritual, and this is how Goffman calls this, a corrective ritual. And then the thanks, and this is the 4th component, and we say, you know what, thank you for cutting me some slack. I don't know what was wrong with me. I didn't mean to offend anyone, and I really appreciate you guys letting me explain myself. And then now it's complete. Now we're done, and we're ready to go and have a good time with the rest of our evening. So Goffman explains that emotion is central to each of these steps of the ritual, and that's something that you could consider is what emotion might typify or be indicative of successfully moving through these steps, or we can flip it around, as we're wont to do, we like to do, is what emotions are present when the ritual is not, when the restorative ritual is not working, right? So, yeah, and to answer that question. Now, the books here, this previous slide, the presentation of self in everyday life, reading Goffman's a ball. Goffman writes really well, fascinating topics, so I recommend that book, and I'm going to show you another one here on the next slide, and that's Interaction Ritual. So either of these books, both of these books, I highly recommend. And the nice thing about these books is there's been literally, you know, hundreds of thousands in print, and they're available now. And a lot of times these books, you know, if you're in a used bookstore, you're talking $1.50, $2, right? From Amazon, maybe $5. So some powerful reading at a super low price, maybe one of the best values in our life when you think about it. So enough unsolicited commercial advertisements, but I'm a big Goffman fan, as you can probably tell. So feeling rules now, another aspect to this, right, are central to this process of impression management. That is the presentation of face in everyday life. Impression management is sought to create a positive impression of selves in our interactions with others. Now, I tried to do this to a somewhat minor extent at the beginning of this course online. What I'm finding out, I mean, if I'm learning a lot about teaching online, one thing that saddens me is I don't believe that I have the impact of personality online that I do in the classroom. And I love the first day of class. I love being in the classroom. I love putting on the music. I love watching students come in. Students I know who've taken classes with me before come up and say, hey, right? There's kind of a vibrancy. But I know that first day of class, in that first 5 minutes, that is my time to frickin' create the impression that will guide us through the rest of the semester. And it's an amazing dynamic time, right? So I want to create a positive impression, but beyond that, it goes beyond positive. There's actual aspects of impression that I want to create. This is something I want you to consider when you go into a job interview, when you arrive at a party, a dinner party, whatever, that to the extent that we're mindful and conscious of our ability to create the impression that we want, right? Guided by the context, but this is a dynamic time, and this is another place to demonstrate our emotional intelligence through the face that we present within these contexts. This impression management process then is fraught with emotional experience. That is, there's a certain amount of anxiety. But most of us are used to standing in front of audiences. Sure, we get anxious. I get anxious on the first day of class. I get nervous. But notice, that's affective arousal. I can use that. I can use that, hopefully, to create a more dynamic presentation of self. And with experience, we're able to do this, right? Through practice, through experience. Right? But it's subject to myriad rules based on the nature and the level of the interaction. And as my example, as I let this example unfold, notice the power dynamic when we're in a classroom setting. That is, I really do possess the power. You know, it's been conferred upon me by the university. And so I have a greater level of flexibility in doing this. I'm kind of one up in that situation. The trick is not to appear that you're relying on that power differential to get the job done, that it's coming from somewhere else. Is part of the trick. There's a lot to think about in presenting the self, right? So through these processes, the moral order is created and recreated continuously, and what I'm trying to do is set the stage and set the boundaries on the first day of class, right? What is acceptable, what is not. But the process can also be used to save face, or the process can also be used to attack or destroy face. So we can direct this towards others. I watched like the first, I don't know, my wife and I watched like the first half hour of the first presidential debate last night. Many people in the media called it a shit show, and that's probably an appropriate label. We saw both candidates attempting to create an impression within a context and within a debate context. And we start looking at the context. What does it mean to debate? It means talking about policies, my stance, right, versus someone else's stance. But we see that maybe some of the approaches taken in the debate were complete violations of the interaction ritual. That is, we see personal attacks, we see endless non sequiturs, really talking little about the issues. It was really a horrible experience to watch that debate. I couldn't take it after, I don't know, maybe the first half hour, right? And what we saw there is at least one actor using this process to attack, right, and attempt to destroy the other candidate's face rather than discuss policy. So for many of us, we walk away with this idea that that is not what the debate was for. The face presented was not consistent with the context in which it was being presented. That would be an analysis from this point of view. So, Interaction Ritual, another awesome book by Irving Goffman. Now, let's spend a little time with Arlie Hochschild, and she begins, why is the emotive experience of normal adults, normal adults in daily life as orderly as it is? When you think about it, with 330 million people in this country, we have these face-to-face interactions, and they are so well regulated for the most part. I mean, the consistency, compatibility, comfort, right, are the norm in the majority of interactions. And Arlie is coming back and saying, well, why is that? Why are we kind of so good at this for the most part? And obviously, you know, there's countless exceptions, but those attract more attention than just the consistent doing well, right? Why, generally speaking, do people feel gay at parties? Which is what's supposed to happen, right? Sad at funerals, happy at weddings, right? And weddings especially are kind of really cool in that regard. Emotion work, we manage our feeling to conform to cultural scripts and feeling rules. And what we usually see, you know, at a wedding, especially the reception, is this is the one place where it's probably acceptable to drink a little too much, dance one's heart out, right, and just have a good time in general. Why do we do that? Because our cultural scripts tell us to do that. It's an expectation, and we're allowed to do it. Now, the type of emotion and level of intensity are subject to these rules, right? And so each context carries within it a set of rules which are appropriate emotions, and the intensity of those emotional displays, what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Now notice, these contexts also are embedded within larger cultures, so we can see huge cross-cultural differences, right, in how a context dictates behavior. Now, Arlie says that we can engage in surface acting, pretending outwardly to deceive others, right, or we can be deep acting, deceiving the self as well as others. So sometimes we put on the face that's appropriate to the situation. It ain't our face, right? But we're going to pretend because we know that it will make the interaction go more smoothly. Sometimes, though, in order to protect the self, we have to even deceive the self. That is, we're putting on a phony face, but we're acknowledging it less and less as phony in an attempt to deceive ourselves. Now Sartre is going to call this, Jean-Paul Sartre, right, existentialist philosopher, is going to call this, shoot, my mind went blank on that. It'll come to me in a moment. It's not central to the situation. So emotional work and labor then. Body work involves altering the physiological aspect of the emotional experience or expression, so that is, I got to calm down. I'm going to take a couple deep breaths, right? Or if we want to talk about it in terms of the previous assignment, we're going to operate on the vagal tone, right? So we're going to try to increase our vagal tone, might be one way to put it. Interestingly, some psychopaths, and we had that lecture previous, some psychopaths who have an impoverished emotional experience have to work themselves up. They actually get themselves angry and jacked up so they can respond in a more violent manner, right? That's far rarer than trying to calm oneself down. Cognitive work involves altering thoughts and ideas, so we have both available to us. That is, I can work on the arousal, but I can also work on the thinking context of it. And notice, this derives really kind of from the two-factor theory, that they're both present there. So, evocation or suppression is used for socially evocation is used for socially desirable emotions. That is, I want to build on them, I want to present them, right, to a greater extent. Conversely, suppression is used for socially undesirable emotions. So we can either, you know, kind of magnify it or amplify it if we believe that it's acceptable and will serve us well, or we can suppress it if we feel it's dangerous to express it to the extent that we might want to. This emotional labor then describes workplace manipulations of customer-client emotional states to generate desired reactions. And note, this is where it becomes critically important, is in the workplace. Interestingly, quite some time after this, we see that one of the best predictors of success in an organization is emotional intelligence, more so than cognitive intelligence, right? So, and here's one of Arlie's books, The Outsourced Self. So this emotion work and emotional labor, correlates and consequence, what we're talking about here then is emotional contagion, can be a loosely related example. That is, we read the room, we see what emotions are being expressed, and we allow ourselves to kind of adopt those emotions as a contagion model. Social referencing is associated to this because we're looking to others, and remember the visual cliff with Campos? We're looking to others to get signals, is this okay or not? I'm going to tell a brief story before we end part 2 here, and it was in our social cog research group, and one day my lab mate Clara was presenting, and she hadn't worked with any of us within our lab. She'd really been kind of the lone ranger on this study, and she had no feedback, and she went a long way with it, and she was presenting some of the final results, but there were some serious flaws in her work, and my advisor, Marilyn, who's Claire's advisor, right, is like, you know, I could just tell from looking at Marilyn that she was not happy with this presentation. And someone has to go in and start chipping away at the study and demonstrating its flaws, right? And I guess it was my turn, because I just asked Claire a couple questions, and I looked at Marilyn as I was doing this, like, is this okay that I'm doing this, Marilyn? Or should I back off? And it's like she gave me this invisible nod that says, no, you need to go for this. And I did, and it was horrible because I really kind of tore Claire's study apart. That's what we do in social cog. I didn't tear Claire apart, I tore her study apart, right? The ideas, and it felt awful, but I was being spurred on in this very subtle way by Marilyn, because it was like, someone's got to do it, Mark, and it's your turn to do it, because this is part of the learning experience, is how to do this. So let's stop with that story, and let's go to the next part, and that's going to lay out the assignment for